Hey Clarity crew, I'm here today to give a visual history of the Quran Gate fiasco and fitna that has been unfolding in this past year and the history of it. So let's start in 2016. There was something called the Knowledge Revival email thread, where different Muslim scholars and students were discussing different topics, including the preservation of the Quran. And a lot of the scholars recognized that there were problems in the preservation of the Quran, right? There were lots of scholars from more liberal and conservative persuasions, and Yasir Qadhi sent some emails, and one of his quotes was, "The Quran clearly has some human elements in it." And he said, in what sense then is the Quran preserved? And he suggested that Muslims maybe should rethink the definition and the paradigm of preservation. However, Farid was also on that email thread, and Farid saw those emails and he could not refute what Yasir Qadhi was saying, but he was also very disturbed by what Yasir Qadhi was saying because he was presenting a much more progressive view, and he saw this as dangerous, that it would undermine orthodoxy and an orthodox and high view of the Islamic scriptures. So he decided to leak the emails to Abdul Rahman Hassan, who you see pictured there, and he decided to leak the emails to Dawah Man. And Dawah Man conferred with many different of his mentors and even leaders in his Islamic community, and then they collectively decided it was best to go public with these emails to expose Yasir Qadhi. So Dawah Man published a video in 2016 called "What Happens Behind the Scenes in the Dawah Scene," where he reads the emails and basically accuses Yasir Qadhi of hiding this deviance. And he says, we need to expose Yasir Qadhi because he's going to try to get inside of our youth by appealing to them with his really nice lectures and his nice sounding talks, but then he's going to introduce this doubt about the Quran, and that is something we can't have, so we need to expose him. And so that caused a big big controversy in the Muslim world, but it didn't really get out into the non-Muslim world very much. Then Yasir Qadhi continued to make his lectures. He said things like the Hudud, some of the laws are seen as problematic from a modern perspective. He said that Yajuj and Majuj are maybe zombies. And so he questioned some of the traditional and conservative Islamic interpretations of things. And this culminated in his June 8th interview, where Muhammad Hijab hosted him to kind of clear the air. It was an interview designed to kind of clear his name and let him defend himself from some of these accusations. And finally, in the last 28 minutes of the interview, Muhammad Hijab asked him directly, what happened? What do you believe about the preservation of the Quran? And Yasir Qadhi then said, well, I believe the Quran is preserved, but the question of the ahruf and qira'at is really complicated, and the standard narrative has holes in it, and we need to, we have no answers that answer all the questions and answer all the holes. And finally, at the end, Muhammad Hijab asks another question, and it's interesting because we just learned that this question came from Farid. And the question was, if I give you a blank book, could you write the literal words of Allah in that book? And what did Yasir Qadhi say? Aki, it's not an easy yes or no, right? So Farid knew what question to ask Yasir Qadhi that would pin him down in his deviance because he was in that original email thread. Farid is the one who originally saw the deviance and sounded the alarm to it. So of course this interview went up and it blew up on the whole internet, not just in the Muslim world, but also among non-Muslims and among Christians, atheists, and Islam's critics. And so people have been repeating this. The standard narrative has holes in it. The standard narrative has holes in it. And of course we saw with Dr. Shadi Nasser's work, which Yasir Qadhi mentioned in his interview itself, some of the specific holes about the preservation, about the canonization, about the process of how we got the Quran that we have today. And finally, we had Sajid Lipham on November 21st, just the other day, say there's been unspeakable destruction, right? Like that this has caused so much damage, that it's really damaged Dawah, that it's given Christians so many talking points, and he's kind of summarized the damage. And Yasir Qadhi actually just tweeted in response to what Sajid said, and said, well, actually people are misrepresenting me. I do believe the Quran is preserved, but that's the problem, Yasir Qadhi. We know you believe the Quran is preserved, but what do you mean by preserved? How do you define that word? And how do you reconcile this idea of preservation with what we know about the canonization and the process of the canonization of the Quran? Thanks so much, guys, and I'll talk to you later.